Welcome to the game. I'm Mark Simon.
And I'm Bob Marks.
Please, if you enjoy this show, you can find it on any podcast you go to or on YouTube at the gamepeninsula.com. We're really happy to invite to have on, let me say, San Mateo County Supervisor Jackie Speier, who we have all known for quite a while. A lifetime, really, of public service.
Right.
Staffer to Congressman Leo Ryan, famously or infamously, elected to the Board of Supervisors in 1980, State Assembly in 86, State Senate in 98, Congress in 2008, and retired from Congress in 22, and then ran for the Board of Supervisors in 24 and was elected without opposition, if I recall correctly. So welcome. Tell us.
There was opposition.
Oh, it was minor, though. It was minor. Tell us, why did you run? I mean, you'd had a long and fruitful career. The commute was a killer, we know, from here to Washington. So all members of Congress always complain about that. Why run? You could have easily found 20 other things to do.
Well, I did find plenty of other things to do, but in the end, I realized that I wasn't done, that I wanted to continue to make this county a better place. And it started when I founded the foundation and seeded it with my campaign money. It was about $1 million, and started, building projects around women and children in the county, because we're the richest county in California, the fourth richest in the country. We've got 20 billionaires that live here and 5,000 people that make over $4 million a year. And we've got 30,000 kids living in poverty. Some homeless, going to bed hungry every night. And I thought, I wanted to do something about that. And so over the course of 9 months, we had a conference. We had Matthew Desmond, who was the Princeton professor who wrote the book Evicted, got a Pulitzer Prize for it. And we founded a project called the Baby Bonus, which is going to launch next month. And it's going to provide a $300 commitment of bonus money to families who are born to Medicaid families in San Mateo County, and it will be available to them for 3 years. And the focus is to
a month or a year?
$300 a month for 3 years.
Right.
And why 3 years? It's because that's when all the brain development in infants happens. It's in that first year, the brain doubles in size. By year 3, it's 80% of an adult brain, and the cognitive abilities are actually set by the 3rd year. So we had a child tax credit during COVID. It took half the kids in this country out of poverty. And then, of course, we let it lapse. So the goal here is to show that that investment, 0 to 3, pays dividends in terms of less special ed, less juvenile justice needs, and therefore we should reinstate it at that level from 0 to 3 at the very least, if we're not going to do it 0 to 18. So my goal is to take what we learned and go back to Congress and beat them up about restoring it.
What is it? It's not an exaggeration to say it's a lifetime in public service. What is it about public service that you find so irresistible?
I like to fix things. I like to fix things that are broken. And when you have the power to do so, it has a huge impact. In Congress, I spent 10 years trying to get sexual assault in the military out of the chain of command. It took me 10 years, but we got it out of the chain of command. And pediatric cancer was just a blip on the screen. It's now funded at much higher levels. And 80%, no, actually maybe closer to 90% of kids with childhood cancer survive. So lots of issues that I worked on that over the years, over the decades, that I think have paid dividends to people. And so it gives me great satisfaction to do that. And, I think I've been reasonably good at it.
Yeah. Well, as you look at what's happening in Washington this month, is there a small part of you that wishes you were back there?
Yeah, there is a small part of it, mostly because I think our resistance is pretty lackluster right now. And, but for the unions filing lawsuits. Congress on the Democratic side has been, basically mute, and the Republicans are afraid of their own shadow, so they're willing to throw away Article 1 of the Constitution, and I think it's devastating.
Let's talk a little bit. We're going to get in a minute to some of the items you laid out when you got sworn in and sort of the things on your mind. But before we do that, let's plunge into the controversy of the day, Measure A, which is a proposal to amend the county charter to give the Board of Supervisors the authority to fire the sheriff with a 4-1 vote. You're the only member of the board who has not taken a position on Measure A. Your absence has been noted, and it often speculated that you're going to be the lone holdout. Tell us, do you have a position on Measure A?
So I have, I wasn't on the Board of Supervisors when they passed it. I think it's, a extraordinary effort to do that. But having said that, there was a decision made not to move forward with a recall, which is what typically is done in circumstances like that. But I'm actually not taking a position on the measure or on the sheriff at this point, because now we are in the actual period in which people are voting. And the expectation is that the Board of Supervisors, if this passes, will have a quasi-judicial role in terms of determining whether or not there is cause to fire the sheriff. And those causes are delineated in the amendment. And I don't want to be in a position of being criticized for having bias. I want to be able to go in there and do it in a semi-judicious manner.
So you don't want to be seen as having prejudged the outcome.
That's a good way of saying it, Mark.
Well,
Yeah.
this is how I make my living.
I know, a verbsmith.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, are you one of the arguments against Measure A is that people are troubled by the way it's being done. They think a recall should have been done without taking a position, yes or no, on Measure A. Are you troubled by the way the board has gone about this, or are you comfortable with this is one of the ways you can get rid of a sheriff? This is the way the board chose before you got there.
Well, the board chose to do this, so that's what we have before us. It has actually been tested in the courts and has been done in other counties, LA being one of them, although they never actually exercised that power because the sheriff lost his reelection. But that's what's before us now. So that's going to be determined by the voters, and however they determine it, we will, then move forward.
Yeah.
You've been in office for about a month. How has the County Board of Supervisors changed since you were back there in the 1980s?
Well, in the 1980s, it was a countywide position, and your focus was countywide. I still think our focus has to be countywide because the services that we provide in the county are safety net services, criminal justice services, and they're countywide in nature. So I'm not a big fan of district elections. I understand why they were put in place to make sure that there was better access to be able to run successfully. But I do think that it has narrowed the focus of board members, which I don't think is in the best interests of the taxpayer. So not that we can, rewind the world or the time, back to the future. But to give you an example, when I was on the Board of Supervisors, countywide in nature, we had 2 staff. Now we are narrow in terms of our districts, and we have 3 to 5 staff. We used to meet every week. Now we meet twice a month. So I think part of our function is oversight, and I would like us to do more oversight of our departments. And I think when I'm in a position to do that, I will exercise the opportunity to have more oversight.
LA County passed a measure to create a county executive that would be an elected position. San Mateo County, it seems over the years, Mark and I have talked about this a lot, doesn't have that singular voice to be able to really stand up and articulate what the county needs. Do you think something like that makes sense in San Mateo County?
Thought about it, but our county has been well run for as long as I can remember, and we've had an appointed executive, someone appointed by the Board of Supervisors. I actually think our present executive officer is very talented and probably the best the county has ever had. Having said that, I mean, everyone makes mistakes, but I don't think an elected CEO is the way to go. I actually think some of these positions that we have as elected would be better served not to be elected.
Well, his concern has been voiced by a number of people, which is there's no mayor of San Mateo County, so that when the big cities in the Bay Area get together, they often ignore or overlook or just don't include San Mateo County. Does it just mean maybe the board needs to be more assertive, do you think? Or is there some other way of establishing, as Bob said, a singular voice that really speaks for the county and can show up at some of these regional meetings and, for lack of a better phrase, throw a few elbows?
Well, look at Alameda County. I mean, I guess you could argue that Oakland has the mayor. Contra Costa County, there are, a series of cities. I would say that what we need to do is make ourselves more relevant because we're not a pass-through county. I've said that for a long time. I'd like for us to, rebrand ourselves. And I think that, some of the things we need to do to, be a force to be reckoned with is to have the board assert itself in a manner that is, probably more effective. But unless you wanted to do a city and county of San Mateo, which you could do, but you'd then, reduce 20 cities into one city and county, and you'd have, 20 mayors and city council members pretty pissed off.
You're concerned about district elections and parochialism, which is not the word you use, but it's certainly the implication that there's too much focus on sort of local, what's going on in my district, has been at the heart of your comments and your view of the job since you took office. We're going to run a short little clip of when you first were sworn in your opening remarks. Frank, you want to roll the first clip?
Underscore that as a board member, I will work for all county residents. The services the county provides are for all residents.
Is that your concern, that there just isn't enough focus on everyone at the expense of making sure that my local constituents are taken care of?
That's part of it. I mean, I guess I'm also very concerned about how Measure K funds are spent, and that, each member it was $1 million a year. Now it's $500,000 a year. And, the spending in a district is, I think, not consistent with what the sales tax was intended to do. I mean, I want to see us take that Measure K money. That's $1 billion that has been generated since 2012 in sales tax dollars. I mean, you can argue there's some benefits that have been lasting. There's been housing that's been made available. But imagine if we did something like universal childcare. I mean, did something big. I mean, I want to see us build a lot of workforce housing. I'd like to see us, spend the money so that we can point to and say, this is why your sales tax dollars matter.
Well, we have another clip that really of you again at your swearing in that touches on that pretty strongly. So why don't we roll that clip now, and then we'll come back and ask some questions about it.
Enormous extra resources. Over $100 million annually generated by Measure K sales tax. Excuse me.
My phone went off.
We have spent $150 million on housing and homelessness and $85 million on public safety and $78 million on health and mental health. I want us to fix what's broken. We should focus Measure K money on really big changes that improve the lives of everyone, like universal affordable childcare or creating workforce housing. I hope we can reevaluate how Measure K is spent and focus it in large part on bringing down the high cost of living in San Mateo County.
So since you've taken office, you voted against a number of Measure K allocations. What has been the reaction of your colleagues to this idea of let's take that money and do something big, when clearly many of them, some of them, openly concern themselves with taking care of their district? That's what they committed to do when they ran. How do you bridge that gap in terms of how they got elected, what they got elected for versus what you're asking them to do?
Well, I think you need to look at what the money is being appropriated for. And I think I could go in any number of those districts and say, did you want your money to go for this or for that? I mean, so much of it is duplicative of what's already being spent countywide on those services. And there's a fair amount of political benefit that I think is attributed to those contributions. And then besides the 500,000 that each member gets, you then go to the executive and have them spend the Measure K money in their districts. Again, duplicating some of the services already being provided. So I will support Measure K allotments that members provide that are countywide in nature. I'll give you an example. I don't know how much money is left from Dave Pine's account, but I'd like to see us buy drones for code enforcement. They use Google Maps. Well, Google Maps doesn't cut it. And we just had one case in Roanoke Park and now one case in San Mateo County where there were illegal cannabis being grown, and the work conditions in San Mateo County where the cannabis was being grown were atrocious. So even with the work we've done in terms of trying to identify all the farms on the coast and the working conditions that these farm workers are on, I don't think we have been as successful as we could be. So, I'd like to see buying a number of drones so that they can see in real time why is an air conditioner operating at 8 a.m. in the morning, which was a tip-off in Roanoke Park that they were, growing illegal cannabis.
Talk to us a little more about the universal affordable childcare. How would that work, and how much do you think it would cost?
Well, we don't know that answer yet, but I can tell you I'm now serving on the Child Care Partnership Council, and there were grants that were available to bid on, and in San Mateo, out of 22, only 2 were funded for more construction. Had all 22 been funded, it would have created 600 new childcare slots in San Mateo County for a cost of $15 million. So that kind of makes sense to me. We need more slots and we need more trained personnel. So the county is embarking on an effort that they already had established, another Measure K funding, to spend $4.5 million over 3 years, and in conjunction with ISI, which is the Head Start entity, and others, to train candidates to become childcare workers. I think that's a step in the right direction. But how do you fund it? I mean, New Mexico has been able to do universal childcare in part because they have an oil severance tax that they've been able to use. We're going to have to find a revenue stream, and but I think that's the big elephant in the room anymore. I mean, families, the quality of life and the cost of living in this county could be reduced dramatically if we could fund universal childcare. So we've got to go to corporate entities, most of whom have shut down their childcare centers, and we've got to go to the public, and we've got to figure out how much it's going to cost. But we do know that there's a huge waiting list for childcare. So that means that one parent is not working, in part because they're staying home with that infant. We do have now the TK, which takes 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds into a school setting. I think if we could focus on 2-year-olds even, that would be a huge step in the right direction. So we're just at the beginning of putting this together. My foundation will probably hold another conference this year specifically on this, not to talk about the problems, but to talk about the solutions.
You laid out in your opening remarks, we didn't show this part of the clip, a list of things you'd like the county to do. One of them was to encourage employment at the county because the cost of living is hollowed out. The ability of a lot of people to work who can't live here anymore and want to work for the county. You want to have a job fair. You want to do the county core, which is 16 to 21-year-olds who would essentially do apprenticeships in county government. And there are lots of jobs all the way from, junior park ranger to, I assume, being one of your interns. But you talk about universal child care. You talk about an ambitious program to build housing, workforce housing on public land. Those are all expensive propositions, and I don't think Measure K covers all of them by any means. So what should the county do? For example, you talk about corporate contributions to childcare. Is it possible that they get a tax break for making that kind of contribution to the county? So it's the classic reporter question of an ambitious program. How are you going to pay for it?
Well, I mean, that's the big question. But when you're paying $3,000 a month in childcare in San Mateo County, that's enough to choke any of us. And it's higher than some college educations are per year now. So I don't know the answer to that yet. That's what we're working on. And we'll see, where we can go. Maybe we start small with maybe just 2-year-olds, because oftentimes there is coverage for parental leave now in year 1. But, the idea of doing a job fair, we're doing a job fair. We're doing it, I believe, in early May. We've got huge vacancy rates in many of our departments that are really red flags for me. When you have a 40% vacancy rate in social services for child social workers, we need to be concerned about that. But there's job vacancies in so many of our departments that we need to encourage people to look at the county as a good place to work. I was talking to the presiding judges. They are in desperate need of court reporters. You can start as a court reporter right out of high school with an 18-month course and make $120,000 a year in San Mateo County. So part of it's just exposing young people to the opportunities that are here and get them hooked. I mean, I ran an internship program through my entire political career, and I was at actually a memorial service this afternoon, and one of the interns came up to me who, interned, 20 years ago probably, and her story was much like most of the stories I hear. Most of these young people get hooked on being part of the public process, and she is now an attorney. So I'm very excited about what we can do. The other thing that I think we need to do is build a conference center in San Mateo County. Outside of the small one we have in South San Francisco, we don't have a big conference center. The fairgrounds is ideal. There was a Blue Ribbon Commission at one point that looked at it, and then it was shelved. But you look to San Francisco and Santa Clara County, they all have them. And not everyone, most people don't want to go into the city for their conferences now. So we could be a huge generator of additional revenue to businesses in San Mateo County if we were to build one.
Yeah. Bob asked you how different county government is. How different is the county? And how much has the cost of living become sort of the dominant change that's taken place throughout your career?
Well, I think it's the cost of living and the income inequality. So we have, very wealthy people and very poor people. And the middle class has really been hollowed out. That's why so many kids aren't living in San Mateo County anymore unless they're living at their parents' home.
Yeah. Well, I just got my son out. That's the good news.
Yeah. Back to the jobs issue. You think it's possible to create a program with the College of San Mateo and the other colleges to train court reporters, to train people for the specific needs?
We've already met with, I met with the chancellor this week. And when we focused particularly on training for social workers, she was very excited. They're now going to embark on, developing a curriculum and a plan. Yes, absolutely.
Well, I think we've run out of things to ask you about this time. I think we'll get to it again, but might as well ask the classic reporter question. Will you run for another term?
I'm going to open up another campaign account.
Okay. That's probably disappointing news to quite a few people who were upset that you ran in the first place, but this is America. It's your prerogative, right?
Right.
Are you worried about the impact of these Trump policies on our county and what they might do?
It keeps me awake at night now.
Yeah.
It's going to have a profound effect on our workforce. It's going to have a profound effect on the people that live in this county. And it's going to, unravel democracy. I mean, he'll only be there 4 years, but the damage he will do is going to be felt for the next 30 years, 40 years. What he's doing to NIH, to CDC, to USAID. I mean, they're reckless and they're based, frankly, on myths. People are always surprised when you tell them that the foreign aid budget is 1% of the federal budget. They think we're spending, 40% or 50%. The perceptions are so off, and he is playing to those false perceptions.
Did you? Well, go ahead, Bob.
Santa Clara County, San Francisco, I believe today they're suing the Trump administration over his executive order to withhold funding to sanctuary cities and counties. Do you think San Mateo County will join that lawsuit?
We certainly will, I think, discuss it in closed session this week.
One of the things I know that motivated you, at least according to the public record, was the board's vote to cooperate with ICE at a 0 level. The Supervisor Mueller introduced some exceptions that were for extreme violent felonies. Do you plan to have that issue revisited? Because I know you had a different view on it than the majority.
Right. So it was a 4-1 vote to add an amendment that would have exempted those who commit crimes of murder, sexual rape, and abuse of children. Those would be cases where we would cooperate with ICE, and that went down 4-1. We have the most liberal sanctuary system in the entire state. There are 36 exemptions in San Francisco. I don't know how many there are in Santa Clara. The state has another set of exemptions. It was knee-jerk. And let me give you an example. A man who was an asylum seeker living in San Bruno with his significant other and her children raped the 15-year-old daughter of his significant other. His son called the police. The father beat up the son, was taken to the county jail. By the time his trial took place and the pleading, he had been there 2 years. He got or maybe he had been there over a year. In any case, he basically served his time at the county jail and was released. I don't think he has any right to be in this country. And the family was frightened and fearful that he was going to come back and be revengeful. But there are good people who live here who are immigrants and have the right to live their lives here seeking asylum. And then there are people who are not, who commit serious violent crimes. And I just don't believe the majority of people in San Mateo County would support that sanctuary law that was put in place.
It seems one of the problems here in California, particularly, but across the nation, is a perception that the Democrats want to protect everybody, including the people that you're talking about. The Biden administration, I think, had a figure of 430,000 violent criminals in state, county jails across the nation. Don't you think the party needs to, as you say, separate out who they're trying to protect and who actually should be deported?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And that election probably should have been, the biggest slap in the face Democrats have had in some time. I mean, there were you can point to a lot of reasons why Kamala Harris did not succeed. But, one of them, I think, was the fact that, for the longest time, there was no willingness to even say we wanted to protect our borders. And then we got to a place as a party to say, yes, we want to protect our borders. And we want to make sure that the system works and that the laws are, held in place. And we want to move that whole process for asylum seekers into a much faster pace. And there was actually a bill, if you remember, that was a bipartisan bill that was tough. It was a strong, tough immigration reform bill. James Langford, senator from Oklahoma, who I served with in the House and was his vice chair of a subcommittee, a decent guy. Not that I agreed with him on most of his positions, but a good, decent person. He was the architect, along with Chris Murphy on the Senate side. And Donald Trump called and told the Republicans to kill it because he wanted it as a campaign issue. So the Democratic Party, to answer in a long-winded way your question, the Democratic Party did realize that we were on the wrong side of that issue and that we had to be more responsible. And that measure was one that would have passed and been signed into law.
Well, one of the concerns that we had a lengthy interview yesterday with your old friend and colleague, Anna Eshoo, and she didn't put it quite this way, but the concern was that opponents become enemies. And there's so much of the discussion and debate is driven by that kind of division. The ICE debate caused a flare-up on the Board of Supervisors, and I think that prompted you to introduce a code of conduct. Would you talk a little bit about why you did that and what you think it may have accomplished or you hope it will accomplish?
Well, I was truly disturbed by the rhetoric and the debasement and the vitriolic nature of the interaction by my colleagues, the colleagues on the Board of Supervisors at the time. And I don't think there was, good leadership to shut down what was vicious and inappropriate conduct. So the code of conduct now is in place, and it gives the board the ability to censure a member who does not comply with it. And it was passed 5-0. So I frankly think the members learned a lesson through that, very spiteful period. And, there's been, I think, a good degree of decorum existing on the board since I've been on it.
I suppose when you go back to when you were first on the board in the 80s, that kind of code of conduct wasn't necessary, was it?
No, it wasn't. I mean, it was a very collegial body. If you remember, I actually got engaged to one of my colleagues on the board at the time.
Yes.
And it was a very constructive board.
Mhm. Yeah. Even after that, when I was working there, the thing that struck me, and this goes back to what you were saying, is all of the supervisors, Tom Nolan, yourself, Anna, Tom Huning, who I worked with, they looked at big things. They looked at challenges that were affecting the county. They looked ahead, not just what's happening next week, but what's going to happen 5, 10 years from now. And it seems like in recent years that's been lost.
Yeah, I do fear that, Measure K had something to do with it.
Mhm.
I also think reducing the number of meetings per month, the lack of oversight, probably, I think those three things have had an impact.
Well, you'll continue to have one as well. Jackie Speier, thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to having you on again and again as some of these issues and some of your agenda unfolds, hopefully with the money it takes to get some of these things done. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Great to be with you both.
Okay.
I'm Mark Simon.
I'm Bob Marks.
That's The Game. You can find us on thegamepeninsula.com where you see your podcasts. And I also want to make sure to thank our producer, Frank Bravo, the man who actually makes all this happen, because Bob and I have no idea what's going on here. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next time on The Game.
Bye now.
Right.